Some of history's biggest moments, the turning points that define an entire nation, they don't start with some huge explosion. Nope. They often start with a simple request, a demand that sounds logical on the surface, but wow, it turns out to be a massive and tragic mistake. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today from 1 Samuel chapter 8.
It's funny, there's this pattern you see over and over again in these ancient stories. You get this incredible victory, everyone's celebrating, and then bam, it's immediately followed by some huge failure. One scholar, Dr. Robert Chisholm, actually calls this pattern infamous letdowns. And believe me, after a massive spiritual revival and military win in the chapter right before this, Israel is gearing up for one of the biggest letdowns in its entire history.
All right, so the story kicks off with the people of Israel coming to their leader, the prophet Samuel. Now, for decades, he's been their judge, a kind of all-in-one spiritual and military guide chosen by God. But here's the thing. He's getting old, and the elders of Israel, they're looking ahead and they see a big problem brewing. And of course, they think they have the perfect solution. So the elders show up and lay out their case to Samuel. And honestly, it sounds pretty reasonable. Point 1, hey Samuel, you're old. Okay, can't argue with that. Point 2, your sons, the guys who are supposed to take over for you, they're totally corrupt. I mean, they're taking bribes, twisting justice. It's a huge mess. So their big conclusion? Therefore, you need to appoint a king to lead us. Makes sense, right? On the surface, a leadership problem seems to need a new leadership structure. But there was something else going on under the hood. Okay, and this is the real kicker. This is the phrase that just blows their whole cover. Tucked away at the very end of their request, they say they want a king. Why? So they can be like all the other nations. See? This was never just about fixing a broken justice system. Not at all. This was about fitting in. It was about looking strong and secure, just like the neighbors. So as you can imagine, Samuel is not happy. He's hurt, he feels rejected, but when he takes it to God in prayer, God gives him this completely different, mind-blowing perspective. He tells him, Samuel, listen up. It's not you they're rejecting. They're rejecting me. I'm the one they don't want as their king anymore. Wow. So this isn't just some political reorganization. This is a full-blown spiritual rebellion. They're literally trading God's direct rule for a human system they can see and control. And then, in a move you might not expect, God says yes. He tells Samuel, okay, give them what they want. But, and this is a huge but, not before laying out one of the most serious, sobering warnings in the entire Bible. He makes it absolutely clear that he's going to spell out the true, heavy cost of the king they are begging for. So Samuel gets everyone together, and he begins this really dramatic speech. And I want you to pay attention to the language here. This isn't, well, a king might do this, or he could do that. No. This is a forecast. God is telling them this is exactly what is going to happen when you get the kind of king you want. And let me tell you, it's not a pretty picture. The entire warning really boils down to one single powerful word: take. Samuel lays it out plain and simple. He will take your sons for his army. He will take your daughters to work in his palace. He will take your best fields, your vineyards, 1/10 of your grain, 1/10 of your flocks. Basically, this king isn't going to lead you, he's going to own you. He's just going to take and take and take until finally you yourselves become his slaves. And if that wasn't bad enough, here comes the final chilling knockout punch. God makes it crystal clear. This is a one-way street. There are no takebacks. He says, when that day finally comes and you cry out for relief from this king you chose, I won't answer you. Just silence. The choice, once made, is final. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting, because here's the twist. It's not that God was totally against the idea of Israel having a king. Not at all. In fact, if you go back hundreds of years to the book of Deuteronomy, you'll see he actually laid out a whole blueprint for the kind of king he wanted for them. And you guessed it, it was the absolute polar opposite of what the people were asking for now. And this just lays out the tension so perfectly. On one side, you have the king like the nations. What's his deal? It's all about power, right? Gathering horses for a big army, taking a bunch of wives for political deals, hoarding gold and silver. But then you look at God's ideal king. What's his job? The exact opposite. Don't trust in armies. Don't collect wives. Don't pile up wealth. His main job, his number one priority, was to be a humble servant who personally copied and studied God's law every single day. What a difference.
The original Hebrew is so cool because it has two different words that capture this idea perfectly. The people, they were asking for a melech. A melech is a sovereign king, an absolute ruler, the kind you see in all the other nations. But God's plan was always to give them a nagid. And a nagid is totally different. He's more like a prince regent, a leader who knows he's ruling under the authority of the true king, God himself.
So what do you think the people did after hearing this incredibly grim forecast of slavery and oppression? Did they change their minds? Nope, they just doubled down. They refused to listen. They basically heard God's entire warning and said, yeah, we don't care. We still want a king. When you peel back all the layers, what this really comes down to is one simple thing: fear. That was their true motivation. Think about it. God had just delivered them in a miraculous way, but there was a new enemy on the horizon and they got scared. They were tired of having to trust in an invisible God. They wanted something they could see: a king on a throne, a physical army. They wanted to walk by sight, not by faith. And this is where the story gets just brilliant. There's this amazing, clever wordplay happening in the original Hebrew. The word they use for asked for is sha'al. Okay, got that, sha'al. Because get this, the man God gives them as their very first king is named Shaul. We know him as Saul. Do you see it? The people sha'ed for a king, so God gave them Shaul, the asked for one. He literally gave them exactly what they asked for, right down to the name. And here's the crucial part. God chose Saul based on their standards, not his own. We're told over and over that God looks at the heart, right? But the people, they were just looking at the outside. So God said, okay, you want a king that looks the part? You got it. And he gives them Saul, who was literally a head taller than anyone else. He was tall, he was handsome, he looked king-like. It was an incredibly powerful and ultimately painful lesson in the danger of judging a book by its cover. And all of this leaves us with a massive question, one that echoes right down to our own world today. Because this story isn't just some dusty piece of ancient history. It's a timeless case study. It forces us to really grapple with this idea. What happens when a nation, driven by fear and the desire to just be like everybody else, gets the leader it asks for instead of the one it actually needs? That's a heavy question, and it's definitely one worth thinking about.